Once upon a time, in the hills of southwest Missouri, there was an army base with a secret weapon that had nothing to do with guns or bombs. This is the story of Camp Crowder and the librarian who changed lives. The year was 1944. The war was at its peak. Young men were being drafted by the thousands, sent to bases across America for training before being shipped overseas. Camp Crowder was one of those bases. It sprawled across 60,000 acres near the small town of Neosho, Missouri, a city of tents and barracks that had risen from farmland almost overnight. 60,000 men lived there at any given time. 60,000 young men, far from home, facing the prospect of combat. They trained with rifles and radios, with bayonets and bazookas. They marched and ran and climbed. They learned to kill or be killed. But in the evenings, when training was done, they had nowhere to go. Neosho was too small to absorb 60,000 soldiers. There were a few bars, a few diners, not much else. The men sat in their barracks, lonely and scared and bored, counting the days until they shipped out. Then came Eleanor. Eleanor Jenkins was not a soldier. She was a librarian from Kansas City, a small woman in her 40s with gray hair and spectacles and a smile that could calm any storm. She had volunteered to come to Camp Crowder because she heard that the base had no library. 60,000 men and not a single book. She arrived in the spring of 1944 with a truck full of donated books and a determination that nothing could stop. The Army gave her an old storage shed at the edge of the base, a dusty building with a leaky roof and no heat. She cleaned it herself, scrubbing floors and patching holes and building shelves from scrap wood. She painted a sign and hung it over the door. Camp Crowder Library, open every evening. The first night, nobody came. Eleanor sat alone in her little shed, surrounded by books, waiting. She waited until 9 o'clock, then locked up and walked back to her quarters. She did not cry. She was not the crying type, but she wondered if she had made a mistake. The second night, a single soldier appeared. He was young, maybe 19, with tired eyes and a nervous way of moving. He stood in the doorway, looking at the books like he had never seen them before. "Can I help you?" Eleanor asked. He jumped, startled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to bother you. I saw the sign." "Come in," she said. "Please." He stepped inside slowly, touching the books with gentle fingers. His name was Private First Class Robert Bellamy. He was from a small town in West Virginia, the son of a coal miner. He had never been to a library before. There was no library where he grew up. Eleanor showed him around. She handed him books, explained what they were about. He held each one like it was made of gold. Finally, he chose a thin volume of poetry by Robert Frost. He checked it out carefully, writing his name in Eleanor's notebook, and promised to bring it back. He returned 3 days later. He had read the whole book, some poems twice. He wanted another, then another, then another. He came every evening, always polite, always hungry for more. He told Eleanor about his life, about the mines, about his mother who had died when he was 12. He told her that reading made him feel like he was somewhere else, somewhere far from the war. Word spread. Other soldiers started coming. They came because Robert told them about the books. They came because they were lonely, and Eleanor listened. They came because the library was warm and quiet and felt like home. Soon the shed was overflowing. Men sat on the floor, on boxes, on the steps outside. They read novels and history books and magazines. They wrote letters using paper Eleanor provided. They talked to each other about books they had read, about home, about their fears. Eleanor moved among them, recommending titles, finding books for every taste, remembering each man's name. She learned their stories. There was Private Martinez from Texas, whose family had come from Mexico and who spoke both English and Spanish. He loved adventure stories, tales of faraway places he had never seen. There was Sergeant Kowalski from Chicago, a tough city kid who cried when he read a letter from his little sister and thought nobody was watching. There was Corporal Washington from Alabama, who wanted to be a teacher after the war and read everything he could find about history. Eleanor remembered them all. She remembered what they liked to read, what they talked about, what they dreamed of. She wrote letters for those who could not write. She found books for those who could not read and taught them patiently, one word at a time. She became their mother, their sister, their friend. One evening in August, Robert Bellamy came to the library with news. His unit had received orders. They were shipping out in 3 days. He stood in the doorway, holding the book he had just finished, and his eyes were wet. "I don't want to go," he whispered. Eleanor took his hand. "I know," she said, "but you have to. What if I don't come back?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she went to her shelf and took down a small leather-bound book. It was a collection of Shakespeare's sonnets, old and worn, her own copy that she had brought from home. "Take this," she said. "Keep it with you. Read it when you're scared. Read it when you're lonely. Read it when you need to remember that there is beauty in the world." He took the book, holding it like a treasure. "I can't take your book, ma'am." "You can. You will. And you will bring it back to me when the war is over. That's an order, soldier." He smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him. "Yes, ma'am." 3 days later, he was gone. Eleanor stood at the edge of the base and watched the trucks roll out, carrying her boys to the ships that would take them across the ocean. She waved until she could not see them anymore. Then she went back to her library and waited. The war went on. More men came, more men left. Eleanor kept the library open every night, 7 days a week, never missing a single evening. She wrote letters to the ones who had gone, care of their units, addresses that changed constantly. Some wrote back, some did not. She prayed for all of them. In the spring of 1945, the war in Europe ended. Men started coming home. Eleanor waited. She watched every truck, every train, looking for familiar faces. She saw Sergeant Kowalski, who hugged her so hard she could not breathe. She saw Corporal Washington, who had indeed become a teacher and wanted to thank her. She saw Private Martinez, who brought her a bottle of wine from Italy and told her stories of the places he had seen. But she did not see Robert Bellamy. She asked about him. Nobody knew. She checked the casualty lists, her hands shaking. His name was not there. She checked the prisoner of war reports. Not there. She checked every list she could find. Nothing. Months passed. The library stayed open, though fewer men came now. The base was winding down, preparing to close. Eleanor kept waiting. Then, on a cold November evening, a soldier walked through the door. He was thinner than she remembered, and older, and he walked with a limp. But his eyes were the same. He held out his hand. In it was a small leather-bound book, worn and battered, held together with tape and hope. "I brought it back, Mom," Robert Bellamy said, "just like you ordered." Eleanor took the book. She looked at him. She did not cry. She was not the crying type. But her hands trembled as she set the book down and opened her arms. He stepped into them, and she held him like a son. Robert told her everything. He had been captured in the Battle of the Bulge, spent months in a German prison camp, nearly died of starvation. The book had been with him the whole time, hidden in his jacket, read so many times that he knew the sonnets by heart. He had traded his last piece of bread for a pencil and paper to copy them when the original started falling apart. The guards had never found it. "I read them every night," he said. "They reminded me that there was still beauty. They reminded me that I had to come back. They reminded me of you." Eleanor Jenkins died in 1980, at the age of 82. In her will, she left instructions for her belongings. Most went to her family, but one item was sent to a small town in West Virginia, to a man named Robert Bellamy, who had become a teacher and a father and a grandfather. It was the book. The same leather-bound book, repaired and restored, with a note inside. For Robert, who taught me that a library is not just books. It is hope. Camp Crowder is gone now. The land has returned to farmland, the barracks torn down, the training grounds overgrown. But if you walk through those hills on a quiet evening, if you listen carefully, you can still hear them. The voices of young men reading aloud by lantern light. The gentle murmur of a librarian recommending a book. The sound of hope, alive and well, in the middle of a war.